structure. Ask briefly, specifically, and finish with it. Briefly, specifically, finish with it. And ask, you may say, my question to Michelle or to Anne. So, excuse me. We heard two good speeches by two good people, male and female. This is the biblical balance of it. Created in his own image. Now, excuse me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Now you have the opportunity to ask briefly, specifically, and finish with it. You may ask.
Now I may ask. Philosophical viewpoints aside, the practical things that you do, is there any difference?
I feel like we should have talked about this ahead of time.
Yeah. I guess practically what I try to do is voice my concerns at the political level, to talk about I basically almost adopted a family. Ended up they've been having troubles for a long time. The father had sexually abused the child. He was in jail. He's been out of the case for a while. There's been a lot of problems, depression, anxiety, a lot of issues that are present. And I've done everything from they needed a new transmission. For the car was broken down. They needed loans for different things, and I've helped them out as best I can. So I try to do things on a personal level as well as on a political level. I was out in I was out at Occupy Philly for a couple weekends, and I guess that's pretty much what I see. That's kind of what I see as what I do to help out.
Yeah, and I would say the how, I think you're always going to have disagreement, even within the Christian faith. If we got a bunch of Christians together, you'll have some Christians who feel that it's focus on the political issues, see more kind of what you were discussing with distribution, things like that. You'd have other Christians who would completely disagree with that view. So I think that you're always going to have disagreements on how it gets done. But I don't see that there's a disagreement on what needs to be done. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Somebody else? Okay. Briefly, specifically.
I guess I think Mr. Thomas said something. There's no good or bad, or good or
That's
bad.
my perspective. Yeah.
What do you think about someone like a Hitler or a Stalin? And then I have the second question is, what are your two views? I think you contrast on homosexuality. For instance, in Leviticus 18 and 20, it says they should be stoned to death. And in Romans 1:27, it says that it's an abomination. And I think most humanists support that. So I guess your two contrasting views on that.
Okay,
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me. The topic is on poverty, not homosexuality. So your second question is out of point. Thank you. They will answer your first one.
Okay. The first question with regard to there not being a goodness, not being good or evil in a situation such as Stalin or Hitler or Pol Pot or whoever you want to say, is the road to hell is paved with good intention. And my perspective is that however horrendous an act may be done, the underlying need, or that there was an underlying need that person was trying to get met. However horrendous the strategy and how hurtful it is, there are plenty of on a smaller level. There are certain things that occur if someone has a need for understanding, and there's a possibility that their strategy may be to shake or to hit or to yell. The underlying need is beautiful, it's understanding. But the strategy that person learned in order to get that need met is very harmful. So it's the strategy which is the problem, but I think underlying it is, the underlying motive in my mind is always the need. So if there were new strategies that Hitler or Stalin or whoever saw as other ways to get their needs met, I honestly think that there is a possibility that they might have done something different.
Okay, Michelle.
So I think obviously in the Christian view there is good and evil, and any Christians are welcome to chime in on your thoughts as well. I don't have the monopoly on thoughts. But there is that we are inherently, because of the fall, we inherently tend toward doing the evil, but through the grace of God, through Christ, we are able to overcome that and be able to do good in this world and be able to be good, I should say. So obviously from a Christian perspective, Hitler and Stalin and even me, I'm in God's hands for God's judgment. So I don't know, I know the fruits of Hitler's actions, but it's up to God to judge and to punish accordingly, but also to redeem. And from the Christian perspective, while what Hitler and Stalin did were very obviously extensive and evil, that we all are capable of doing evil, and we all need a Savior who keeps us from doing those things.
If you would like to add to Michelle, wait a minute, I have asthma. So be merciful to me. If you would like to add to Michelle Christian answer, feel free to do so. If you would like to add to Mr. Thomas Humanist answer, please feel to do so. So who would like to add to Michelle Christian answer? You ask question and someone go ahead.
I'd like to underscore Full Hashem, as they say. Here I am, resident fool. I think that with respect to Ian,
Which one do you,
the question about evil.
which one do you like to add to her answer or his answer? Which one?
I'd like to add to the show.
Okay, go ahead.
But with reference to.
Go, Lord.
No, seriously, I think the question of evil, which I, being a Christian, do believe in, is a very perplexing one.
Yeah.
And I cannot, when I look at some of the things, Hitler and Stalin and people like that are extreme examples, but there seem to be some kinds of evil that it's very hard for me to see what the underlying need was. A delight in the suffering of other people. A delight in dominating or ruling other people. Alan Bullock, a British historian, says about Hitler, he delighted to show that men were swayed by their baser passions. He delighted to show that men could be swayed by fear. There's a case, and again, I'm giving extreme examples, but there was a case of a person who delighted in not only in torturing children, he would capture them and torture them, but I don't think he carried it out, but his plan was actually to videotape the things that he was doing so that he could show them to his next set of victims. I mean, does there not come a point in which evil is evil is evil, and in a deeper sense, it's just like incomprehensible? And I agree also with you, Michelle, and I'm echoing what you say, that there is within us, which is to say there is within me, that little spark that says, yes, yes, under certain circumstances, I might enjoy that.
Okay.
Which I would say, if that is the case, then God help us all.
Thank you. Now, to be fair, someone else, if you have the desire to add to what Mr. Thomas said, yes, please.
I think that using the terms good and evil
Yes.
implies a judgment
Okay.
that may not necessarily be helpful in ameliorating the problem. And while I don't go so far as to say that the concepts of good and evil are rejected by me, I do think that just saying this is evil, evil defined as the absence of good, or evil defined as a definite force in and of itself, doesn't solve the problem of what do you do about it, okay? And leaving it in God's hand is one way of dealing with it that I particularly find not helpful. I would like to find what practical means we have to deal with it. One of the examples, someone, you were talking about childhood sexual abuse in the family that you adopted. It's something that most of us would agree is evil. There is a lot done in our society that tries to address this that is not particularly helpful. Megan's Law being one of them, an incredible waste of time and energy and money and resources that does absolutely nothing to protect anybody. And a proven strategy that works is early intervention. And yet there is such a stigma attached that any person that goes, there are very, very few resources for anybody who would say, I have these urges, I know they're awful, how do I get them taken care of? I would much prefer that there be strategies to address that rather than to say this person is evil and God's judgment will
Thank
deal
you.
with it.
Thank you. If you would like to have more information which will help all of us to add, not to the two speakers, but to the question as a whole, feel free and be brief. I'm trying to be fair. If not, the door is closed. Someone else, do you have any?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Briefly.
Okay.
Precisely.
Okay, Mr. Tom, are you Tom or are you Mr. Thomas?
Ian Thomas.
You can call me Ian.
Ian. Ian, if you have been elected to the state House of Representatives,
Yes.
The poverty issue, food stamps, would you have gone along with Tom Corbett saying we need to balance the budget and maybe cut some things for the poor? How would you have handled that?
In
Or
my
said we need, it doesn't matter to go $2 billion over, go to $34 billion or whatever.
Yes, I won't be brief. I would not support what Corbett said. My view is I think that food's definitely in favor of providing food stamps as an availability for people in poverty to actually have food security. On top of that, I'd be in favor of taxing their welfare at a higher level.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Question, Ian. I appreciated many things you said in your talk. The comment about one of the ways to deal with poverty is, and I agree with you, we have incredible amounts of resources in this country that could really help impoverished people. I got the sense that you were in favor, speaking of the Occupy Wall Street, of a redistribution of wealth. That sounds to me like communism, and communism has proved to be very, very faulty. What's your reaction to that?
Okay, so how communism has actually been enacted has been much more a tyranny or oligarchy. I'm not in favor of communism. But redistribution of wealth is actually what we do right now. Our current progressive tax system is redistribution of wealth. There is a higher tax bracket for the people getting more income, and there is a lower tax bracket for the poor. So we're currently actually within that system, and it's not necessarily an either/or type of thing. Whether you are in a purely capitalist system or if you're in a communist system, there's a very large room in between for that, so that people can still get their needs met without losing their need for autonomy, their need for freedom, and their need for expression.
Thank you. Would like to add anything?
Oh,
No, if you like, if you like.
I was gonna say, I had no thoughts to add
Thank
to
you.
that.
Somebody else?
Can I address some of the earlier comments that were made? Okay, sure.
Yeah, Sue.
You said there were many things that you agreed with, Michelle. I just wonder if the two of you could draw some distinctions. What makes the Christian view of poverty and the solution distinctive from what he said? How would you see your view being distinctive from ours?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm
sorry. My apologies. I'm looking through the notes.
No worries. I see the differences being, first of all, the inspiration and impetus is a big one, obviously, because from the Christian perspective, the reason why we do these things is because of Christ, because he called us to it, because he gave us everything we need, and out of the abundance he gives us, we give, because it is our goal is to glorify him. Our entire life is focused on glorifying him, and one of the ways we glorify him is to provide for others. It's not because we have to, or it's commanded. It's an effect, not a cause. It's because of the love that's poured out on us by Christ, we give. So that's, to me, the biggest distinction between the two views. I would say there can be distinctions in terms of political views, but again, that can be true within Christianity. But I would say a big how for us is really focused on out of the abundance that we have, we are stewards of what God gave us. It's not ours. The earth is not ours. But we are stewards, and therefore as stewards we are to share from that. So I don't know if any other, after Ian speaks, Christians would like to share the distinction as well, but I think that's probably the biggest.
Okay, thank you. Wait a minute before you answer. Anyone here would like to add to Michelle's answer? None? Okay.
I think that I guess one of the things that Michelle said is that it's the fulfilling, I guess the need for, basically love. Love is the impetus that drives it. To glorify God is kind of, in my mind, is kind of a strategy to meet the need for love. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeking to help people in poverty by meeting my need for love for other people as well. So in my mind, there isn't really a great distinction.
Thank you. If you have anything to add to Mr. Thomas, feel free, briefly and precisely. Do you have something?
Well, I guess.
No.
For Michelle.
You ask one question, let others ask.
Are you?
New topic.
New topic?
Yeah.
No?
I'll wait.
You finished with the questions now?
I just got a new topic, so I just raise my hand.
Okay, anyone else would like to ask? What? You would like to ask again?
Yeah, I'd like to ask again. You talked about good and evil. Michelle mentioned religious people. What do you do when religious people do evil deeds? I'm thinking about Numbers 31. When the Midianites came back, Moses said, "Did you kill the women and children?" The general said no, and he said, "Go back and kill them, except for the virgins, you can keep them for yourself." Today, Moses would be tried as a war criminal. You put him in the Bible, Jews, Muslims, and Christians worship him. So what do you do about situations like that? Not just Moses, but throughout history, religious people,
Thank
a lot of
you,
people.
thank you. If you can answer, fine. If you can, maybe someone else. Don't feel obligated.
Well, I
Is that
mean.
poverty then?
The
I'm a
topic
lawyer,
is-
I have an answer
The
for
topic
everything.
is poverty.
I know, but he said, Mr. Thomas said good and evil, so I was following up on that.
We are as much in need of salvation as anyone else. We don't see a distinction. So a Christian is just as capable of doing evil as anyone else. The only difference is between a Christian and not is that we have a Savior, and that I should say we all have a Savior. That we believe in a Savior who has saved us from those things, and that He gives us the ability to hopefully not do those things. But not that, as soon as you become a Christian, you're perfect and you never do any wrong, and we somehow are immune from doing bad things, because that's not at all. In fact, Norm was commenting about how to the contrary. Yeah.
To answer.
In reference to his question.
His question.
I think one of the things that's kind of difficult when it comes to cultures is revering people and heroifying people that have not always done the most wonderful things, such as Columbus. There's heroification of a number of figures that I think that we would all be better off really recognizing the full extent of what is within that person, but not to negate any positive that came out of them.
Okay, thank you. Try to stay on the topic. The topic is poverty. Please. Yes.
So I just want to say, it sounded like so much of what you said was together. So I just wanted to address something that you didn't agree on, which was the idea that poverty will always be with us. What I wanted to ask was, Michelle, do you have thoughts, or do you have thoughts on the idea that we know that there are societies where poverty doesn't exist, and there's been a time in human history when poverty didn't exist? I mean specifically going back to hunter and gatherer days, where people lived in small bands, and so there would exist poverty if if there was a drought or something like that. But for the most part, those are tend to be pretty self-sustaining communities. It's not the kind of poverty we have today. And certainly in the modern times, we have civilization where in some countries and in some societies, we have abject poverty has been all but eliminated. Where in other places, abject poverty is in some cases the majority of people who are in abject. The difference between abject poverty is when your basic even material needs aren't even being met, opposed to poverty of like not being able to get treatment because you have cancer or something, you can't afford it. So I guess do you have what is your do you think what is that idea that we won't have that poverty will always be with us? What does that really mean in terms of the specifics of poverty?
And again, anyone can feel free to jump in
Yes.
on this one.
May I make a comment?
Please. Kevin, by the way, is a deacon at our church. He oversees yeah.
I would see that that's more of a local expression, that there's always going to be poverty because there's always people who will, for whatever reason, not benefit from the system that they're in. And so I am called in my local setting to care for those around me. And maybe in that sense, poverty is eradicated, in Willow Grove maybe, for 10 years. But the idea just that poverty is out there. Not necessarily in every local situation. There's, bell curve and things change. And so that's how I would see that.
So it's not a hopeless attitude necessarily.
No,
so-
it's certainly not
I
hopeless.
didn't mean amen.
No, I appreciate that. That's a good clarification.
Yeah, it's certainly not hopeless. Actually, it's very hopeful because it gives an avenue. And I like the idea in, if the 1% gave all their money away to eradicate the poverty in their area, I mean, what would that look like? I don't know. It'd be pretty wild to think about. I certainly wouldn't be in the 1%. I'd be in the other percent. So I would probably get something, and I would like that.
Okay.
So I'm done.
Thank you. Somebody else? Yes?
Yeah, I think there's degrees of poverty as well. I think of somebody like Steve Jobs, who just died recently. He was filthy, stinking rich, but all that money he had couldn't get him the needs he had to extend his life. I forget what he died from, but the money couldn't buy the cure he needed. And so there's a sense in which, even with all that money, at that very moment, he was impoverished. It wasn't enough.
Thank you. Somebody else? Yes? Adding to the answers or asking a new
No,
question?
dealing with poverty.
No, excuse me. I meant.
Kind of adding and throwing something into the equation. What Marcus said, when I think of poverty, I think of abject poverty. Because we use the term poverty very loosely.
Okay.
Okay, people that are saying they're really poor have so many more goodies than I have. My income is half of the poverty level. I am so far that I feel richer than other people. I just don't have the goodies. And I think that's what we should be talking about is abject poverty, because if you take the 1% or anybody, I mean, how can you, this bumper sticker was what I saw today. Somebody's bumper sticker alluded to the fact to look at the abject poor, to actually, not turn away from, to actually look and perceive. And when you perceive, maybe then you will address, and maybe then up here can come and understand this down here. But if you choose, that is a choice not to look.
Yeah, thank you. Somebody else?
If I could just follow up.
Yes,
on that,
please.
Because you make a really good point that I never even thought of, which is it hopeless? And the Christian perspective on pretty much everything is not hopeless. It's very hopeful. And so I hadn't intended to give that impression. More that it is a constant expectation and drive of ours. And really, I think it's one of those areas where, again, I believe God brings good out of bad situations. And I think this is a great example. Because what you see in poverty, which is in and of itself, we all agree is bad, but can bring out good. And I don't want to speak for you, but I'm guessing you guys would agree that good can come out of this because you can, like you said, contribute, and therefore by contributing to the other person, you're doing a good thing. From the Christian perspective, it's that the Lord calls us to that. And so what happens in a situation where you have poverty, whatever the poverty, your description of heaven and hell is what happens, where we are given an opportunity to come out of ourselves and be a part of someone else's life. And so while poverty in and of itself is bad, the opportunities it gives are very good. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to comment.
Yeah. I don't, in my perspective, I don't think that it is required to have an unmet needs in order to find value out of the needs. Basically, because there's the choice to focus on unmet needs, but there's also the choice to focus on needs that are being met and to celebrate that. So when we have, it's also an opportunity to celebrate our needs being met. And in my mind, there isn't a necessity to have nots in order to recognize the positive feelings of having. If everyone had if somebody was thirsty and everyone had the opportunity to have clean water, drinking that water would still be refreshing, even though that's even though nobody is dying of thirst.
Thank you. Somebody, a question?
Sometimes it's the practicality of poverty that gets to be a stumbling block. Let me give you an example, and then maybe you can suggest ways, creative ways to get. I remember being in New York City and a man without much of a winter coat or anything is huddled in the doorway of Saks Fifth Avenue, and you know, all these people are walking by, and my heart's touched by this man, and I'm thinking, what can I do to intervene in his life? I had no idea. Later on, I thought I had a very practical opportunity. He had no socks. I could have easily walked into Saks Fifth Avenue and bought their $40 socks and given him a pair of socks. But you know, at that moment, I was stymied by the size of the problem and what to do. Do you have any creative ways, either one, you know, when you come against poverty staring you in the face, and it's not your normal domain, what do you do?
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
So, first thing that most people need in a situation like that is empathy. And the only person who really knows what needs that they have unmet at that point in time is themselves. So, are you basically trying to connect with how are you feeling and what are you needing? Are you feeling uncomfortable because you're needing some socks and some warmth? Would you like me to get some socks on your feet? But to ask, to request to have them be a part of the decision-making process on how to make their lives better. That's my perspective.
Thank you. Shade?
I think that we all have found ourselves in that situation, and I think we all get wrapped up in a lot of conflicting thoughts that wind up leading us to paralysis, really. Oh, if I give him the $40 socks, he's going to go sell it for drugs or whatever. I mean, we've all been there. You know, from a Christian perspective, I would say that are we approaching it in a way that we're asking ourselves, are we trying to glorify God, or am I trying to avoid an uncomfortable situation? And from that, then, I would say the focus is on the heart and not necessarily on the actual action that comes from it. If my heart is to help this person, because I, you know, from a Christian perspective, I love the Lord and I want to glorify Him, then you're asking yourself, what is going to help him? That, you know, to your point, is understanding the issue. And maybe you can't do that in the split second. Maybe you can. But ultimately, I think that's what we're looking at. Not, did you buy those $40 socks or didn't you? But what are you trying to accomplish and why? And so maybe you didn't buy the $40 socks, but you did something else. You know, you got to know the person a little bit, or you found another avenue to give. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. Time is up. My comments, closing comments, and you will have a chance to react with them and ask. Number one, we are glad that we met. Number two, my heart was moved by the topic, by the two speeches, and by your questions and contribution. Number three, I would like to suggest a topic for our third meeting, because I heard it in his presentation, needs. I would like to suggest to talk about the needs of humanity from a biblical point of view and from a humanistic point of view. Thank you for coming, and thank you for participation. Enjoy more chicken if you have left over. Get involved in one-on-one conversation. And where we go from here, this topic is very sensitive, and we need participating in helping as much as we can, as, for me, a Bible-believing Christian, as the Lord leads. Thank you. Blessings. Bye.
Sorry.
There is a free book.